News First, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
And a very good evening to you. This is Newsline Live. We are broadcasting from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. And I know it's wet out there. I hope everyone's safe and driving around sensibly if they are. And our guest this evening is, of course, Dr. Harsha De Silva, who is, of course, the candidate from the Colombo district for the SJB. Good evening to you, Dr. Harsha.
Good evening, Faraz. Nice to be here.
I was going to say to you, good evening, Mr. 1990, because I always associate you with the 1990 service, and despite what anyone might think. So, actually, it's one of those good things that's happened in the country.
Yes.
Anywhere one talks, we've been, they'll say, especially we ask them, come on, tell us what they did, give us one thing, and the first thing they always say is that. So, again, well done.
Thank you, Faraz. It's just amazing feeling. I mean, sure. I've been traveling across the district, during this campaign. I am overwhelmed. Sometimes people, hug me, old ladies. Recently, a gentleman thanked me, it's like 10 times, you saved my life. A person, got a heart attack, fell down, somebody called the 1990, they came, they gave oxygen to him immediately. And when he was taken to the hospital, they said later that if he didn't get the oxygen then, right, he would have died. So now he's got a pacemaker and all that. But multiple stories.
Excellent. It's very good news, actually, and it's gratifying, and it gives us an up when good things happen in our wonderful country, because as you know, we always have issues, and one of those issues is what I was going to ask you today. What is this business about? Is it true that government debt has gone up by 1,000 billion rupees? That's a trillion rupees for the mathematician in you.
Just before I get to that, I must thank the 1,500 staff of 1990 who work 24/7 every single day in 297 police stations that attend to all and every emergencies across this country.
And it's good that they're based at the police stations.
Yeah, that was because the GMOA refused when I was trying to park them at hospitals. They said no. And
But it's a good thing because the police know every nook and cranny in their area.
Actually, we even advise the police because we are highly sophisticated. In fact, I tell you, this is an open challenge. I've told this to the president also. I said to him, sir, if you can show me some service that is more efficient than 1990 Suasari. There is no service in this country that
and
is
because he's a techie-minded man, the president might understand that.
He understands, and I need to appreciate him also because when I resigned, I wrote him a letter and I said, sir, please take this under you, because I didn't want it to be in the regular system. So that is why we introduced new legislation, Act number 18 of 2018 called the 1990 Suasari Foundation, and we created it to be a separate entity, and the president has the power to appoint 4 private sector members to the board and 3 ex officio, Secretary Treasury, Secretary Health, and the Inspector General of Police. So I had appointed Duminda Ratnayaka, Vijay Malasekara, Professor Asita De Silva, and Mrs. Sanda Salgado. And then when I met him personally to discuss this matter, he said, what do you want me to do? I said, don't do anything, sir. Just let them run this company the way, or entity. It's a 100% government-owned entity, but independent of the state apparatus, because it needs to be run like an emergency service.
Good.
And what he did was exactly that.
Wonderful. So that's good. So he does listen.
He does listen. In this case, he has listened. Answering your question, it's almost unbelievable.
The government debt has increased by 1,000 billion.
Yeah.
Which is 1 trillion rupees.
Yeah, I mean, for 60 months, right, during the Yapalana government, the total outstanding debt of Sri Lanka increased by 5.6 trillion
Right.
rupees. Okay, for 60 months, 5.6 trillion, and in the last 4 months, it increased by 1 trillion. Actually, 994 billion. Right? So I'm not saying to compare
No.
these two, but still this is a huge increase in government debt.
And what is this being brought about by?
I mean, partly the depreciation of the currency also, because this is the latest available information is as at 30 April 2020.
Because now the currency is trading at that much higher.
Yeah, currency has appreciated a little bit because imports have been stopped. You know, people are trying to argue that, look, you know, we are doing so great. For the first time, we are having a surplus on the trade account.
That's a misnomer, isn't it?
It is a misnomer, obviously. Recently, a friend of mine called me and said, Harsha, if you need tires, please buy immediately because I'm going to run out of tires. Right? And a gentleman called me from one of the main motorcycle dealerships and said, Mr. MP, can you do something about this? Can you speak out? That we don't have spare parts, we don't have brake pads, we don't have clutch cables. So it's a safety issue on the road. And LCs cannot be opened unless you can get 6 months credit, and that is almost impossible to do.
Especially because the global economy also is challenged.
It is challenged, but stopping imports, now it has been further extended by another 6 months. That's not the solution, right? Because you can hold the rubber ball under the water, but the moment you take your hand off, the rubber ball is going to pop up, right? And if you look at the consumption basket of a typical Sri Lankan household, you will see a large amount of imported items. So banning imports may bring a solution in the short term, but in the medium term, what are we going to do?
Thank you for all the questions that already start coming up. Whenever Dr. Harsha De Silva is on the program, our messages get increase and increase. 0772 300 305 by SMS, please. Please ask Dr. Harsha, what will happen to interest rates in the medium term? In your analysis, what will happen?
Yeah, I mean, there's, you can't hold interest rates and exchange rates down at the same time. It's not possible. So interest rates are kept down because there is moral suasion on the one hand, because the government has basically told investors, particularly the state-owned funds and banks, insurance companies, etc., that you need to bid below a certain given rate of interest, right? And there's a lot of excess liquidity in the market, about 160 billion rupees gets parked overnight at the central bank. So the weekly report of the central bank will show you exactly what the excess liquidity is.
They reduced that by 1%, didn't they?
No, actually by more than 1%. The what is called the standard lending rate used to be 8.5%, but now it is 5.5%.
Right.
Right. Standard deposit rate used to be 7.5%. Now it is 4.5%.
Right.
So the entire interest rate structure.
But even though there is all this excess liquidity, I still get messages from people asking us to highlight the fact that banks are not as forthcoming as they would like them to be. And when you speak to the bankers say, well, we're not going to risk our depositors' money unless we have appropriate guarantees from the central bank.
See, this is what I have been arguing for a long time, that the problem has been misdiagnosed. It is not a matter of a shortage of liquidity. Printing money is not the solution. The solution always was and will be into the future the ability, the commercial bank sort of has the perception he has when a person comes to borrow, whether that person is able to repay the loan. So the issue is collateral, right? So a lot of these businesses who are suffering right now due to coronavirus has already mortgaged everything they have, including their own homes perhaps.
Yeah.
Right. So there is no more collateral to be given to the bank.
That's absolutely spot on. I had a person on the phone earlier today saying, look, they're giving working capital, but they're saying, look, you've got to pay only salaries, only this and only that.
Sure.
And then he's saying, what about all the money I borrowed privately to pay the salaries up to now?
Right.
Apparently there's he can't go and redeem himself off that. Sure. Using this money.
Sure.
And so he is saying again, he's stuck.
Yeah, two issues there. One is the collateral issue, and that's where I was a little bit encouraged, because there was an announcement by the government about 3 weeks ago that there's going to be a partial credit guarantee. So up to I think 5 million or something, they were going to guarantee about 80% of the loan that was to be given out to the entrepreneur, the businessman, and if it was higher than that, 50% or something like that. I can't exactly recall the limits, but that is really what is required. But in this case, that credit guarantee was coming from the central bank, but it should really come from the treasury, right? So you create a pool. It is like an insurance fund, because not everybody is going to default on the loan. If somebody defaults or falls into trouble, then you can take from that fund and ensure that the bank is not out of pocket, because the bank is lending depositor money, right? But I don't know to what extent that is working, and people who I call and ask whether they've been offered these facilities, I haven't been getting very positive answers.
That's right, yeah. And it's the same with the people I've spoken to. But this matter about the interest rate for senior citizens, what will happen there? Because obviously they're dependent on their income.
Yeah, I was speaking to a group of professionals, some retired, yesterday evening, and that was what came up strongly. Because a lot of people have invested their retirement money in fixed deposits, and they relied on the interest to survive. So currently, rates have fallen to maybe 6, 7, 8%.
They're guaranteeing 15% for about 1.5 million, right?
Yes, and that is, there is a confusion there, and that confusion is, during the previous government, there was a scheme, a facility given. If you invested that amount of money, or up to 1.5 million rupees, during a particular period of time, then you would continue to get the 15%.
Right.
So I asked certain senior staff in certain banks, and they said, no, we are not offering that anymore. But other banks have told me, yes, they are continuing to offer. So I think it's bank specific. But yes, up to a certain amount you get 15%, but beyond that you don't.
Okay.
And also in some banks, I understand you don't.
I see. Do you think that, in your view, the banks have got enough comfort from the central bank in these short-term guarantees?
To an extent, I think they have now. Because they've offered the partial credit guarantee, right? You have to be fair by the government also. There are limits within which they have to operate. And but here the issue really is, who is providing the partial guarantee, the credit guarantee? It's not the treasury. Ideally it should come from the treasury, but this is the central bank that has to give the credit guarantee, which is again not it's kind of unusual.
It's not ideal?
It's not ideal.
On that note, we'll go for a short break. When we come back, we're going to ask Dr. Harsha De Silva, who's our guest today, why did the United National Party tamper with EPF money during your time? Your question. Dr. Harsha will answer it after the break. Stay with us. Newsline Live.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. We're in conversation with Dr. Harsha De Silva. So tell me, Dr. Harsha De Silva, what was the answer to that question? Why did you tamper with the EPF in the UNP?
See, in the late 50s when Minister Ilangaratne introduced new legislation to create the Employees Provident Fund, it was to ensure that the hardworking people had a decent income at the on retirement, right? To spend their old age in comfort, and therefore it is very unusual that in legislation an interest rate is specified. The interest rate of 2.5% is specified, if I'm not mistaken, in the original 1958 legislation.
Is that a minimum?
No, yes, a minimum of 2.5%, because if you really go back, treasury bills were trading at around 1% at the time.
Okay.
So he wanted the return on the EPF to be 2.5 times what a person would have got on treasury bills, right? Now, later on, we have been trying to, figure out, did he mean real interest rate of 2.5% or nominal interest rate of 2.5%? Because interest rates have risen nominally over the years, but real interest rates have remained pretty much in that range. Now, the problem was really at the time the central bank was given the authority to manage the fund. Because at the time there wasn't technical expertise elsewhere to do it. And it was very clear that it was on a temporary basis, it was parked there. Now, the conflict of interest arose when on the one hand the central bank manages the EPF, which is trying to get the highest rate of interest for the working people, whose savings, compulsory savings, is really the EPF. At the same time, you have the public debt department, also of the central bank, which is attempting to borrow at the lowest possible rate of interest. So here you have two arms of the same entity, one trying to get the highest rate, the other trying to get the lowest rate.
There is a conflict.
Yeah, so the conflict is there. So always what happens is the public debt department wins over the Employees Provident Fund department. And that is when, the whole issue of how much interest was given to the EPF when on a treasury bill or a treasury bond and so on and so forth. So to create that market is when the auction system was introduced, and we don't want to get into that once again. But those conflicts have remained, right? Conflicts of interest have remained over the years. So when again the government says, look, you cannot bid above a certain rate of interest, then what happens is you're tampering with the EPF, because EPF...
We had a situation where the former finance minister at the time issued instructions when it came to the bonds, asked them to bid low.
See, I'm not going to go there, right?
But that's where the conflict is as well.
No, the conflict has been there. The conflict of interest has been there since 1958, right? It's a chronic issue that needs to be resolved somehow, right? But what I'm saying is, even now when you say, look, this is the rate at which we will take the money from you, and note, of the trillions of rupees in the Employees Provident Fund.
But this conflict, Harsha, lends itself to a lot of unhappiness, another term for corruption.
Yes, unfortunately so.
I want to ask you another question. Otherwise we'll get bogged into this bond and all sorts of things. Is there any money left in the consolidated fund?
I don't think so. I don't think there's any money in the consolidated fund. You see, the problem started towards the end of last year when, willy-nilly, the tax rates were adjusted, right, without a proper study to determine how that will affect the treasury. And at that time, we had predicted that the treasury will lose about 400 billion in estimated revenue in 2020. Then coronavirus hit, right? And I think at the end of the year, they will lose more than 600-700 billion from what was expected, and what was expected was only about 2,000 billion. So, which is a huge loss. And if you look at the first 3 months of revenue, tax revenue into the treasury, right? The first 3 months before all this hit, the loss is about, not the loss, the difference from the last year is about 150 billion. So that is not factoring in what was expected, which was obviously higher than the previous year.
Now then, isn't it a fact, this is another question, isn't it a fact that during your regime, the government of Sri Lanka kept servicing external debt, but did not pay local debt, such as the government contractors?
Well, I mean, I can't sort of, say no to that also, but it is always the case where some payments are delayed, right? Not every payment is always paid on time, right? And the contractors have always been saying, look, please pay what is due to us. And even when the 2015 government came into office, there was a huge amount of unsettled bills that needed to have been settled, right? And if you recall the whole bond thing, it was about 100 billion unpaid.
You see, however much I try to get away from this blessed bond, we can't do that.
No, what I'm saying is answering that question. If you recall, right, that 100 billion or something on roads projects was money that was not paid for contractors. So when governments change, there's always money that has had,
but these contractors are now suffering even double. It's like a double whammy because, of course, COVID-19 is here, and they can't get their loans. They can't get working capital.
They have to be paid. Obviously, they have to be paid because they have their own, liabilities. They have to pay their salaries, they have to pay their subcontractors, and that flows. Right? So once those payments are, if they're not paid on time, there is a trickle down impact, and the problem becomes bigger and bigger, right? So yes, they have to be paid.
Now then, there are so many questions, but we've got no time for most of them. But I will ask you the last final question. And you've got a couple of minutes to go. Quite honestly, how many seats will the SJB gain this time round? Bearing in mind you're not Sumana Dasa, but you have the analysis.
I can't say anything other than to tell you that we are expecting 113, right? Right. I mean,
is that realistic, or is that a politician's flourish?
That's a politician's flourish.
Okay.
Let's see.
We have to play the game to win.
Of course. I mean, we are not playing to lose.
Right.
So we will do everything possible to win.
Right.
Right.
Won't that winning game be better off if you had the A team? Because right now you're split. Is there some way that you're going to get back together in the last few days at least?
Somebody asked me this question a little while ago. I was at a small, meeting. I said, have you seen ants, on the floor? They all, proceed along, and you see a little puddle or some water. What do the ants do? They go around the little water on the floor, right?
Right.
So that's what we're doing. So we saw a block in front of us. We are taking a detour.
Right.
So maybe 90 of us are taking a detour on this side of the water on the floor. 10 of us may be taking the detour on the other side.
Now I'm going to finish off with this question. As a professional, and you've explained problems where one government leaves a whole lot of bills unpaid, the next incoming one finds it, when they leave, blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing, right? But as a professional man, don't you think that it's time that Sri Lanka's politicians are filled with professional people who at least know the technicalities?
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, Faraz.
Is that what you're plugging to the people when you
Of course, I mean, people must think this time, right? It doesn't matter which party,
Right.
but you got to make sure that people who can think, for God's sake, people who can think are
Think
sent there.
future Sri Lanka.
Yes, and then we need to debate, we need to discuss, and we need to agree that we need to have national policies. I mean, you know, we are struggling as a nation.
And we're struggling on Newsline to finish. Thank you very much, Dr. Harsha De Silva. That's the way it was on Newsline Live. Sorry for the delay in finishing and sorry for the delay in starting. Take care, have a great evening ahead of you, and of course, God bless.